Fellow actors, writers, directors, and production crew, welcome to Small Talk with Tony, the interview series where we sit down with people in the biz to make small talk. I'm your host, the owner, chief storyteller, and the Tony behind Tony Video. Now, over the course of this series, we'll hear stories and personal experiences from people just like you. So, let's make some small talk.
Actions always find a way to shine brighter than the things you say.
So, today's guest is the incredibly helpful Harry Lipsitz. Harry is a local producer and is a casting director with Casting Buffalo. He is a graduate of Point Park University and has a BFA in Cinema and Digital Arts with a concentration in producing. He has worked on many feature films, and I've had the pleasure to work alongside Harry as well as the rest of the Casting Buffalo team. So, will everyone please join me in giving a very warm welcome to our next guest. Harry, thank you so much for taking the time for some small talk.
Thanks for having me, Tony. Looking forward to it.
Well, we were able to interview the other Casting Buffalo members, and now it's your turn, Harry, so I'm looking forward to hearing from you and getting your perspective on things. So talk to us about, how you got your start in the industry.
I got started in the industry really by having a love for movies and cinema, which my parents being cinema lovers and big in arts and culture, made viewing of movies an important thing for me as a younger child. I also had an older brother and older sister, so I would often creep upstairs when they were watching movies and watch them too. Some of them I probably shouldn't have been watching, but it definitely developed an early interest and love for movies and that world. I went to a high school that really encouraged and saw that I had an interest and helped me sort of push me to go to film school, which is where I ended up going to Point Park University in Pittsburgh, where I studied in a conservatory for film production and concentrated in producing there. Lived and worked in Pittsburgh for a few years after graduating there. It was tough though because I didn't find too much opportunity. I did gain a few jobs here and there, both commercial and film, but it was tough for younger folks like myself at the time getting into the industry in Pittsburgh. There was a much longer established union base there than here in Buffalo, so it just it made opportunities few and further between. So I ended up finding that I was getting hired more back home here in Buffalo, and it was around, I'd say 2015 or so, a little after when Ninja Turtles 2 was here shooting, that I really started to move back home.
So having heard from the other Casting Buffalo members, I get a sense for Kyle having the directing experience, Peter having the acting experience, and you come in with the producing experience. But I feel like the term producer, it can be used in a lot of different capacities. So how would you define your role? And then what is your definition of being a producer?
So it's a very term that can be thrown around very loosely, and it's one that I think has a lot of vagueness to it. But I know what kind of a producer I am, and I think most producers who are producers by trade and live and work as producers regularly, I think they have a pretty defined idea as to what you do. I find a producer to be somebody who basically supports a creative endeavor from start to finish, making sure the project has all of the resources that it needs. And I think the part about from start to finish is a pretty important one because I think it's hard to keep at it and to be consistent in this job, especially if you are producing things on an indie level, say. But I think a sign of a good producer is one who is steadfast and will see a project all the way through to its completion and beyond, because it's that kind of support. It's very integral.
Well, I think that's a good definition. Even though it's a pretty general description, it serves as a guideline. You know, it's a good principle for what the producer does in the relationship to the production itself. So, we've heard from Kyle, we've heard from Peter about their perspectives with casting Buffalo. So, tell us how you got involved as a casting director.
So I got involved with casting Buffalo. First, by meeting and interacting with my partner Peter Johnson, and then through a project in which he brought me on to assist in casting, and he kind of taught me a lot about how to do background casting initially, and then it was Marshall, where we were linked up with Kyle directly in a casting effort sense. We had worked with him prior to that, but it was Marshall where we the three of us came together in a collective sense and really contributed and solely worked in the casting department. And we realized from that, I think that we all had really certain strengths and things that we were bringing to the table, and as a trifecta, the three of us really I think, offer a lot to complement each other and help how we work on a project. Part of casting is a lot of it is who you know and the connections you have. And the three of us have kind of a multitude of different kinds of connections, and that was one thing that helped strengthen us in the beginning. But I also think, aside from that, looking at sort of our personal attributes that we bring to the business, Peter's an actor by trade, Kyle is a director and AD by trade, and myself, a producer. And I think that in those respective ways, we greatly contribute and complement one another as well in terms of how we work through a project in a casting sense. I think, goes without saying, Peter, as an actor, it's a tremendous benefit to be able to understand actors on that level as an actor yourself. You know what I mean? I think for Kyle, he brings the understanding and what comes of knowing sort of the scheduling, logistics, back end of the production, keeping a production, on track from a real timeline sense. And as we know, that's very crucial. And he also understands what the subtleties too that an actor needs to bring from a direction standpoint, as does Peter. Peter understands that direction thing too because he's an actor. And I think my level of knowledge in producing and that area helps kind of fill in any of the other cracks there, and kind of helps us stay on track as a company. And I'm kind of, I feel like I have a bird's eye perspective, or I'm able to look at the greater picture from the standpoint that a producer does. So I think all of those things greatly help us be successful as a casting company.
Well, it makes sense, how you guys work together. You're like the glue that holds all the pieces together. And I think that helps the Buffalo film community because I feel like we're more organized and it's more streamlined when you're dealing with casting notices. So, what is it that's unique to Casting Buffalo? What What do they do that maybe other agencies don't? And what would you say the mission statement behind Casting Buffalo is?
So I think what makes us sort of unique in what we offer as a casting company harkens back in a lot of ways to what I was talking about in terms of the composition of our company and how the three of us bring certain attributes to the table. And I think what that allows us to do is, in a lot of ways, really go above and deliver beyond what a standard casting company would do. We have the ability to, help a production in a lot of ways, not just with casting per se. We have the resources and connections to a lot of crew members. There's a lot of, auxiliary things that we can assist a production with that I think most casting companies, not only would they not even venture in that way, but they also just wouldn't maybe take that initiative to go above and beyond because they'll just stay in their lane maybe. And we want to be as helpful to a production as possible. And when a production is here, we really do strive to give them whatever we can in terms of support. And that goes above just providing talent. But what also we do and what also we bring to the table, I think, is within the casting is a greater attention to detail and also an ability to sort of inject those other things that we were talking about, like our knowledge of actors and our understanding of actors, whether it's Peter and his experience as an actor, or Kyle and his ability with being a director. We have the ability to sort of pivot and if there, in the world of productions, there's often audibles, changes that have to happen. I think given our experience and our different skill sets, the three of us have, we're able to adapt to those changes a lot easier than I think a lot of other casting companies would be too. So I think there's a multitude of things that that we bring as a casting company that's different and vastly different from others.
Well, I have to say, seeing you guys, from where you started to where you are and that growth, it's really nice to see. And even to help contribute to that, by helping people with their self-tapes and making the auditioning process more streamlined. So, based on your experiences, what do you think makes a good producer? What does someone need to be, or what do they need to understand in order to be successful at producing?
So, given that I went to school for producing, one thing I did learn was that there really isn't any real formula per se for, I think, what makes you or has you be a successful producer. I think a lot of it, and I think there's no real formula to what makes you a good director or any real formula to what makes the perfect movie. You know what I mean? I think it's a lot of trial and error, a lot of this, a lot of that. And I don't firmly believe that anybody could tell you, here's the recipe to this. You know what I mean? But what I will say is experience can only help you as a producer. I think thinking about how when I was in film school learning to be a producer, one of the things my film school did at the conservatory was make you take every introductory course that is offered in every facet of basically the film school, right? So you had to take, basic sound class, basic, editing class. Like you need to understand every facet on at least a basic rudimentary level and as best as you can, because I think if you're going to be successful as a producer, showing care and compassion to everybody's discipline on a set is the best thing you can do. You know what I mean? And showing people, not showing people that you know how to do their job, but trusting people to do their job and understanding what goes into their job so that you can support them the way you should, giving them the resources they need, making sure they have the resources they need, but also, you know, there's so many personalities on a film set too, so it goes beyond just the task at hand and the job, but there's a human level too. And being a producer, you have to manage humans too. You know what I mean? So I think there's a side of understanding the job and a side of understanding the person. And I think the best you can do as a producer is try to understand both of those and be as caring, compassionate, and resourceful as you can be for those individuals that you're working with.
Well, when you put it that way, it sounds like there's not necessarily a formula, but there's rather a set of principles. And those principles serve as a guideline to any production. And if you follow those principles, it's kind of like, you know, things tend to work themselves out, things are more manageable. So looking back at everything that you've learned over the years, you know, what is it that you want people to know when becoming a producer?
So I think if I could sort of leave a message that would resonate with anybody, it would be that just to remember when you're working, whether it's in a small production or on a large production, like it's a village that you're working with, and you know what I mean. You're part of a team effort, and I think no matter how big, no matter how small, it's always important to remember that, and to remember that you're there to be a team player, and it's about, you know, sort of it's the camaraderie of everything. You know what I mean? Like it's such a good feeling when you know that somebody's there to support you and has your back, right? And you should be sort of giving off that same, you know, feeling too. Like you should think like, how can I support the person to my left? How can I support the person to my right? Like, how can I be a good, active member of this village? You know, I think if you can look at it like that way, I think that's the best way to go into a project, you know, because there's so many variables heading into something, so many uncertainties. I mean, I myself, I get, you know, anxiety when I'm going into a gig that I don't know much about, you know. It's the first day on a film set or something that I just signed on to, and you know, there's a lot of unknowns. So I think the best you can do going into any project for anybody is to just embrace that that team player mentality, you know. I think about it, you know, in any job that I'm in ever, you know, whether it's things outside of film, you know what I mean, working in the kitchen, for instance, you know, you gotta depend on your teammates always.
Well, very well put. And I think that's going to help out a lot of up-and-coming producers. So for those that are interested in producing as well as learning more about you, what's the best way for people to continue to follow your journey?
So I think one thing is it's definitely keep on and follow us with what we're doing at Casting Buffalo on our Instagram, our website, our Facebook, our other social media pages. We have big plans for the future. It's something that my partners and I are very excited about, sort of developing more events and programs, if you will, that we hope to really keep afloat. So I think that would be something I would encourage everybody to keep up on. And I think this area in general is going to see a lot of exciting activity in the coming years. And I just, it gets me very excited thinking about the prospect of the future here in Buffalo and Western New York for this industry.
Excellent. Well, that concludes another episode of Small Talk. I want to thank my guest, Harry, for joining us today.
Thank you, Tony. It was my pleasure.
And I want to thank you for watching. You can check out all the latest episodes at tonyvideo.com/smalltalk. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram, where you can get the latest news. See you next time.